Welcome to Speedrunner Reviews. In this series I'll be analysing and reviewing games using the mindset of speedrunning. This video will look at the game through three perspectives. First, the casual experience, which is how most people will first play the game. This will look like a condensed standard review discussing the gameplay, graphics and music, and replayability. Next we'll discuss speedrun experience, including all of the interesting tech and also how well the game holds up as a speed game. Finally, we'll look at what's possible with tool-assisted speedruns, showing what it looks like when the game is pushed to the theoretical limit. Today we're playing Lawnmower Man on the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive, which is actually a movie-based game. The movie came out in 1992 and is all about virtual reality and the exciting world of learning through this technology. It takes a turn for the worse though, as our hero turns into a villain and tries to take over the internet. It's very 90s. Now it's important to note that this game is different to the Super Nintendo version. The Super Nintendo version has a different ending and some different levels. So the game's broken up into two main gameplay loops. You've got your 3D sections, which are basically just auto-scrollers, and you've got your 2D side-scroller run and gun sections. These are the 3D sections here, and the goal is just to avoid the obstacles as best as you can and try not to die, and you get to the end eventually. So these sections could look like this, or they could look something like this. They do get a little bit more interesting. There's some that show us some really good 3D capabilities for the Genesis, like the Cyber Run here, and the Cyber Tube is also pretty impressive. So at the time in 1993 when this came out, this would have been really impressive, and this mixed in with the side-scroller gameplay would have been pretty popular. These do get a bit interesting. You have shooting sections like this, and you've also got the cyber war zones where you get to shoot these enemies. Now me personally, I don't really like these cyber war zones at all because the enemies pop up in random spots and it can be kind of hard to shoot them. It's also pretty dangerous because they can shoot you as well. But I'm sure some people would have absolutely loved this. We'll talk more about this when we get to the speedrunning section. The other half of the gameplay loop is the side-scroller run and gun sections. You've got your standard controls. You can jump with the B button, you can shoot with the A button, and what a lot of people don't realise is you can do a charge shot by holding down the C button, and that's a lot more powerful. So that's really critical in the speedrun. Now, given that you need to use all three buttons at the same time, I really hope you're prepared to play with a grip something like this, because that's your best bet to playing this game. I wouldn't suggest just using your thumb because you got some pretty complex movements to do with it all. You basically need to anchor down the C button the entire time you're playing to have that charge shot ready to go at any time, and then from that point you're all good to do the rest with your other two fingers. Bit of a weird one to get used to, but once you do it's not too bad at all. Then you've got normal gameplay stuff, so you've got enemies that you can kill, you got bosses that you can fight, and the really cool thing is the bosses get very intricate when you're mixing in all of your charge shots along with your regular shots, and that gets pretty technical once you get stuck into it. You've also got, as part of this gameplay loop, some puzzle solving elements, like this platform puzzle here. You've got to use these green warps to get past it, and you've got some more depth with your guns. So with your guns, I'm shooting like that normal one there. You can upgrade your gun by finding these boxes and then getting the upgrade. So now I've got this circle gun. My recommendation, if you're playing this game casually, get the circle gun and hold on to it for dear life. Do not let it go. But that being said, there are some other types of guns. So there's this other one here, which is the one we saw before. And there's also this kind of weird one. It's like a snake gun. It kind of shoots forward. This gun is absolutely terrible. Do not use it. It does like 2 damage everything you hit, and it takes heaps of hits to kill things, and it barely ever hits things because it goes all over the screen. Don't know why they thought this gun was an upgrade, but there you go. So as with most Genesis games, you have a choice between easy, medium, and hard gameplay, and this adds a bit of replayability to the game. So the main difference between these options is that on easy the enemies take less hits, and on hard they take more hits. There are also some levels that are laid out slightly differently, like the Cyber Tube and the Cyber Run. The hard gameplay has a harder layout. So in the speedrun, the easy mode is used because it's a bit quicker with the enemies taking less hits, but in the tool-assisted speedrun it uses the hard difficulty because that's generally the standard for TASes, pick the hardest difficulty possible. It gives it a lot of good replayability, and hard mode is actually pretty difficult to beat, so even if you're an expert at this game, having that hard mode there gives you a little bit more to do with it. So this game is broken up into a few main sections. You start off by going through the streets, and that's about 3 or 4 levels there, and then you do the warehouse, which is much of the same. You then infiltrate the shop, which is sort of the main hub area of the game, and then you fight Job. I don't know about you, but I don't really see the resemblance to the Job from the movie there. This boss fight goes into a few phases, so you have to hit his face away and then change all of those access granteds to access denieds. Once you get all of those, you beat the game. Speaking of which, when you beat the game, you might get a percentage counter at the end. So this is one of the rare Genesis games where you can actually 100% it, as we can see at the top there. How you 100% it is you find all the terminals. So the terminals are hidden in each level. Some levels have some levels don't, some levels have 2. And in the terminals you have to break these codes. So the codes are pretty straightforward to break. That one you have to match the shapes, that one you have to pick the only big shape, and this one you have to pick the little shape, and then there's others where you have to spot number patterns. The only tricky one is that one where there's 2 shapes, but when there are 2 shapes you just match the outside and the inside shape to be the same one and you get it every time. Once you learn these puzzles, they're super easy to do, and the terminals spit out some rewards for you. If you get all 10 terminals, you get 100%. If you don't, then you only get 90%. So there's sort of a few different speedrun categories of this game, but also it makes it more replayable in a casual sense trying to 100% it. So let's talk about how this game holds up overall casually. In my opinion, it's got really good replayability. You can see how far you can get each time, because the game is pretty tricky when you first play it. I remember as a kid, every couple weeks I'd get one level further into the game, and it was really interesting to see what came next each time, and make my way through that progression. It's also got the difficulty settings, which adds another layer of complexity. You can try hard difficulty if you want an extra challenge, and on top of that it's also got the 100% if you want to look for secrets in the game and find everything that you can. It's also got some really nice graphics for the time with those 3D sections, and it's got a pretty good gameplay loop in the side scrollers. There are a few frustrating aspects of the game, however. The auto scrollers are not ideal in the 3D sections, but probably my biggest frustration with this game is the gun system. So we've got this awesome shot with that round shooter there, but if you get a quote-unquote upgrade, that might turn it into an absolutely piddly little snake shooter. And I can show you just how different these are. If I try and shoot this portal, it's pretty quick with the circle shooter to go to green. Whereas if I shoot out this gun and get the piddly snake shooter, then it takes absolutely ages for this thing to go to green. So this gun's clearly weaker, but the game likes to make it take priority over the one you currently have. And as you can see with this corridor, you basically have no way around it. If you accidentally shoot this tree out, then you have to collect that gun. There's nothing else you can do. But once you learn where all these upgrades are, you can get the hang of it and it doesn't cause you too many issues. The other frustration I have with this game is the cyber war zones. They're just a bit inconsistent, but they're actually kind of okay in the speedrun. Now I've saved the best part for last in this casual section. This would not be a 90s game without a fantastic cheat code. This is the up, right, A, B, A, down, left, A, down code. What does it do? Well, it unlocks this fantastic cheat menu. So if I have the game paused after I've entered this code, you have to enter the code paused as well, and then when I press C, it brings up this lovely menu which has a level select and a couple of cheat codes. Now you might be wondering, how do I remember this code? Well, it's easy. The code was up, right, A, B, A, down, left, A, down, or you are a bad lad if you spell it out. That is one of the most 90s things I've ever seen. But you can warp to any level, and it's really great. Also, if you pause and press B, then you can skip past levels, and this ends up being really good for practicing speedruns as well. So let's start talking about the speedrun of this game. The speedrun was featured on GDQ a while ago, and that was the Super Nintendo version, which is pretty different to the Genesis version. But this version is what we're going to be looking at today. Now there are 4 runs of the Super Nintendo version and 2 runs of the Genesis version, so SNES is a bit more popular, but they're pretty much just different games. And we'll just be looking at any percent today because 100% is basically just any percent with terminals. So this is footage from the world record by the 8-Bit Beast in 22:45 as it currently stands. And we need to get the elephant in the room out of the way. These auto scrollers suck. That was 37 seconds in that before we could even do any meaningful movement in the run. Now, you can hit walls in the auto-scroller, so it does get a bit interesting there, but once you're good enough that you can avoid hitting the walls, then there's pretty much nothing else to it. You just avoid the walls, you get the same thing every time. But the auto-scrollers aren't all just auto-scrollers. There are some more interesting ones. In particular, let's look at the cyber war zones. So this cyber war zone here, you're going to have enemies pop up, and then you got to hit them as quickly as possible. So this is a really big test of your reaction times to see where the enemies pop up, and then your aim and your shooting and your mashing a little bit. Really interesting level. So I hate this casually, but absolutely love it in a speedrun. But you might have noticed, I kind of knew where all the enemies were going to be in that run. So what you can do is you can map out where the enemies are going to be, and it's actually deterministic. So if you hit them as quickly each time, then they're going to pop up in the same spots each time. As soon as you hit one just a tiny bit late, it goes completely off track, but as long as you're consistent, you can get the same patterns every time. So if you're struggling with mashing or aim or whatever, then that's a potential strategy for you. You learn where all the enemies are going to be and you map it out perfectly. And that can be one of the big keys to improving your time down in this game a lot. The other interesting auto-scroller is the Cyber Run, which involves a turbo section. So with the turbo, you get the turbo when you hit the turbo thing, and you keep it until you hit a wall. So basically, this level is 2.5 minutes of perfect gameplay to avoid hitting a wall at all costs. As soon as you bonk one little thing, your turbo's gone, and it might be a long time till you get it again. So you can save or lose like 20 or 30 seconds in this level just based on whether you get the turbo or not to stay through the whole level. Once you get pretty good at it, you can pretty consistently keep the turbo through the whole thing, but especially as you're learning out the run, this can be a big tiebreaker between you and other people who are playing the game. So because the auto-scrollers are pretty dull, I'm only really going to talk about these run and gun sections in this video. We'll talk about the first one here. This starts with a boss and you take it out with 3 quick charge shots. You want to hit it to the right of the screen so you get these power-ups with invincibility, and then you can do this big jump on top of the library. That jump is not intended, but when you get that metal armor, it lets you jump higher, and turning around and jumping lets you jump even higher. So that in combination together gets you on top of the library, and it saves going to the right there on that grey platform. And that's pretty much all of level 1, but you'll see these little tight movement optimizations all over the place. Next level involves these cyber monkey enemies, and you have to try and get past without dying. It is pretty tricky. If you do die though, it doesn't really matter because you just respawn. This world record doesn't die and it saves quite a bit of time on those cyber monkeys. Fun fact, those cyber monkeys are only in a director's cut of the movie and they weren't in the official release, but they did show up in this game. You've then got this boss, which is pretty easy, just 2 charge shots. But this barrel, if you shoot it, it will explode and kill you. So you have to learn when speedrunning this game, you don't just shoot all the time, you control your shooting to manage it. Level 3 has this interesting section with the helicopter, and you have to be really careful not to hit the ground too fast. If you do, you'll blow up and die. So it's just a little optimization thing, but you want to get it as far as possible and then not blow up. The rest of this level has a 4-wheel drive that you have to kill and then some gas pumps that you have to kill. These pumps are really heavy on the RNG, or it might not be RNG, but it's definitely inconsistent either way. So you hit the nozzles, then you hit the actual pumps themselves, and then you hit this fire dude who comes out after. And the fire dude can take ages to come out, or he can come out really quickly. It's totally down to luck. You'll see in this world record video, this level loses some time, and that's purely just because of the luck there. So about 2 whole seconds. Next up we get the first warehouse level. So this is going to be where we get our gun upgrade to the circle gun, and it's really important that we get that in time. So the first boss here is taken out with a few quick charge shots, and then we make our way up to the gun here. So as I said before, this box you need to break it from really close, because otherwise the gun thing might not spawn. So that can be really dangerous. You then want to avoid all the other gun boxes because they'll actually downgrade you to a worse gun. Coming up is the boss, and it's actually really quick with this circle gun upgrade because you use that in combination with the charge shots and it gets knocked away really quickly. On easy mode this is quick, but on hard mode it takes a lot longer. This level has one of the biggest time saves or losses with this helicopter. You can kill it really quickly just like that, or you can not kill it in time and it goes back and forth all across the screen. So you can save or lose 5 or 6 seconds there, just depending how brave you want to be. You'll usually have to take a death of that helicopter to make it through. The rest of this level isn't too much interesting, it's just platforming. A big part of running this game is knowing your backup for gun upgrades. You'll see that that gun is downgraded at the moment, so this box has another gun upgrade for it. It's just about learning all those spots so that if you find yourself in a jam, you can recover pretty quickly. And this level here has one of the most exciting parts of the run, which is actually a clip to get through this ground. This level normally goes to the right, then down, then left again, but you can get through this floor and skip the entire thing. So I'll show you what that looks like. It's a jump, and then it's a pause when you land here, and then you unpause, and then you want to hit left, right really quickly. Just like that, straight through the ground at the end of the level. So just to show you in full speed, that's jump, pause, left, right, clip through the ground. So what's actually happening there is when you are turning around, the ground doesn't register your collision. So if you can keep turning around, you'll keep falling through the ground. A reason for the pause is we want to buffer that. Otherwise, what we'd have to do is time our left press frame perfectly, and then time the right press frame perfectly after that, which is really tricky. But with a pause, you can just be holding left when you unpause, and if you flick to right the frame after you unpause, it's a lot quicker and easier. So that's what you do there. You can do it without pausing, but it's really, really difficult. So that's what that one looks like. And it's a really cool skip for this level, saves like 30 or 40 seconds. This clip can also be used back in level 2 when I talked about those cyber monkeys. You can clip through the ground right on this jump down here, and you can clip through that green building, skipping any danger you'd have with these cyber monkeys at all. It saves barely any time, and it would actually be slower than what the world record does there, but it's a lot safer. It's just not worth going for in runs usually, unless you're in 100%, which means you need to get to the terminal, which is to the left. The final section here is the shop, and that spans over a few levels. There's not a whole lot to this apart from running and shooting, and then doing some carefully timed jumps and shots to avoid obstacles. So I won't talk about it too much, but there are a few intricacies here and there. One particular intricacy are these exclamation mark items that we'll see shortly after these dudes. They essentially blow up everything on screen, so if you grab that with the boss on screen, it completely kills the boss instantly. It's really cool when that's able to happen, it saves a lot of time. And this run finishes off with the Job fight. I absolutely hate this fight. It's pretty heavily reliant on mashing, and I want to pre-warn anyone thinking about speedrunning this game, make sure you're pretty decent at mashing before you do so. There's a few different strategies. You can alternate 2 fingers on the same button and mash like that, and then you can swap to thumb when your 2 fingers get tired. But realistically, it will be a test of how quickly you can mash and how consistently you can mash, because this is 2 minutes of really fast mashing. You can beat the fight by holding down the button and shooting Job, but it's much, much slower. This world record run gets about 2:25-ish for this segment, but the second place time actually gets a 2:02. So there's a lot of time to save in this fight over the world record, and this will be the main spot where the world record loses time. But that being said, you just can't get much better at this fight without getting better at mashing, and that's usually hard cap just depending on how good you are at it. It's one of the unfortunate parts about speedrunning this game, but it's just the reality of it. You've got to be good at mashing. So now that we've seen what a speedrun has to offer, I want to talk about some positives and negatives of running this game. A big positive is there is very minimal RNG once you learn the patterns in the cyber war zones. You can manage that zone just by reacting to it, but realistically, once you know that it's deterministic, there's pretty much no RNG in this game, apart from the fuel pumps can be a bit of an issue. There's some fun optimizations in killing enemies quickly. You can just get quicker and quicker at it, and it can be really rewarding to learn those patterns and skip boss cycles. There's sometimes make or break moments in the run as well, so there's big chunks of time saves and losses that you can do. There's the clip that we saw earlier in the crates level, and there's also keeping your turbo in the turbo level. So negatives are the mashing at the end with Job. That's sort of the worst part of the run. I hate that it's required, but it is what it is. You can actually really hurt your hands doing it as well. Another negative is the auto scrollers. They're pretty boring to sit to, but they're not as bad as you might actually think. And some levels are pretty capped. There's certain movements you take through the levels, and there's not really a whole lot you can do to speed them up. So your first 3 or 4 splits may be pretty much the same every time you do them. But it's a really fun run to pick up, and if you haven't tried it, I'd recommend you give it a go. There's not many runs on the leaderboard, so you'll be breaking new ground, and it's always exciting to do that with a game. So let's look at how the Taz is different to RTA speedruns. With Taz's, you'll generally see more intricate and complex boss fights, this one for example with the bees targeting individual bees and killing them as quick as possible. Now this probably seems slow compared to your RTA, but remember the Taz plays on hard mode because that's pretty standard with Taz rulings. You might also notice that I'm using the terrible snake shooty gun thing. That's actually amazing in the Taz. Reason being, when you get really close to something, like right up in its face, that gun does 10 damage instead of 2 damage, and you can shoot it a lot quicker than the circle gun. So that snaky gun ends up being really good in Taz. The other thing about the Taz is these cyber war zones end up being super quick. You'll see when I get to shoot these enemies that you know exactly where they're going to be, and you know exactly what to do to shoot them really quickly. Just like that. Probably didn't even seem like 5 enemies all up, but that's what the Taz is capable of. Now the Taz has something else up its sleeve which is amazing. You might remember this glitch from the RTA speedrun where we fell through this floor using the clip and got into this access denied portal much earlier. It skips going around the entire level, saves about 30 seconds. And I said the reason that works is because when you're turning around, the ground doesn't register your collision with it, you fall straight through. That principle works no matter how many times you turn around. So what Taz can do in some levels, like this one coming up, is completely fall all the way through the floor past the death plane and fall so far down that it comes back up through the top of the level. So this level that would have taken about 2 minutes RTA, we do very quickly in the Taz, falling all the way down, coming back through the top, we'll see. Straight back through the top into the end of level portal, doesn't even need to beat the boss. And that's not the only place it's useful. We've got this level here where the same concept happens. Fall all the way down through the level, come back out through the top, and then you'll beat the whole thing without doing that whole climb up. This saves several minutes over the course of the Taz, and it's really exciting to have in the run. There we go, access granted all the way through. There are some other smaller skips that you can do with this, but those are the 3 main big ones, and they save a lot of time over glitchless. In fact, it was finding those glitches in the Taz which allowed them to be incorporated into RTA, but only that one that we see in RTA is realistic for saving a lot of time. So with all this clipping tech, the game actually has a lot of potential to almost be completely broken. If you hack your position to let yourself jump over the wall, which you could do with that clipping technique anyway, you'll actually find that all the maps in the game are loaded. Now this section you normally couldn't get to until you've done the second auto-scroller segment. If we get in here early, you'll see none of the objects are loaded. Now unfortunately what this actually means is you can't progress through this area. So even though you're in the next level 2, what you're not supposed to be in yet, what you'll find is there's nothing in here and you can't progress past it. If objects were loaded into this level, we could skip significant portions of this game in the Taz. So if there would be some way to reload the objects or something like that, it'd be a huge breakthrough for this game and it could save a lot of time. So that being said, there's still a lot of potential for this game to be improved in the long run, if we could find something like this. So let's go over some pros and cons of the Taz now. The pros, it looks different enough to RTA. There's some interesting clips and stuff that aren't in RTA that it makes it a really interesting watch. It's got quick technical boss kills, and it's pretty easy to understand without really knowing the game. You can pretty much tell what's going on. The cons though is that there are too many auto-scrollers. It's a real shame about this game that it's broken up by the auto-scrollers, but I guess you get some cool graphics out of it, so it sort of evens out. That'll be it for this review. If you enjoyed this content, a subscription is always appreciated, and I should have more like it coming out soon. Thanks for watching.